pleasure that I introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Tom Verghese. Tom, can you please remind me?
Verghese.
Verghese.
Verghese. Verghese will do.
Okay, Verghese. He's an internationally renowned consultant, presenter, executive cultural coach, author and founder of Cultural Synergies. Tom's expertise is in cultural intelligence, inclusive and ethical leadership, and the promotion of sustainable global leadership. Tom has over 2 decades experience working in the field of cultural intelligence, taking him to over 40 countries. Working with diverse business leaders across the world has provided Tom with an international perspective and experience as a specialist consultant who equips organisations and their teams with the skills to effectively work with and across cultures. Please welcome Dr. Tom Verghese.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for that great activity and sharing those stories. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you. I'd like to acknowledge the land, the custodians of the land that we're gathered on today. Pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. I also want to pay respect to all your ancestors gathered here today. I was in a workshop a long time ago, and the facilitator said to me, do you know, behind every person, there are 1,000 people standing behind them, and that it surely is possible for you to connect with at least one of those 1,000 when you're trying to build bridges. So I acknowledge your ancestors, because in this room, there must be 100,000 people. So it's great. I want to also acknowledge the committee members of EEON and AIS for the wonderful work that they do. It takes a lot of effort to put something like this together. I want to, when you may have read Roman's post on LinkedIn a number of, I don't know, a couple of months ago, and Roman said that the very first D&I workshop that he attended was mine. Okay? That was back in 1997. And really, there's no greater gift a teacher has than for a student to flourish. Right? And in 1997, Roman was really young, enthusiastic, and very energetic. He's still very enthusiastic and very energetic. So thank you for being here. So great to be here. And I feel privileged that I have old friends here, new friends here. Melody here was in my very first Train the Trainer session that I did for Ansett Airlines in 1996, when I didn't know what I was doing. I was just making it up. So it's so good to be here. So when Roman asked me to speak to you, I thought, cultural intelligence, inclusion, agility, making it happen. What am I going to speak to you about? A group of diversity and inclusion practitioners, my peers, my peer group. What do I talk to you about? I pondered this question, and I thought, I'm just going to talk to you about something that's current in my own mind right now, in my own psyche. And that is the topic of legacy. I turn 60 next year. And in my culture, turning 60 is a transition point. And it's something that I'm giving a lot of thought to in terms of what is my legacy and what's the next stage of my life, and what does that involve me in. I've been an independent consultant now for the last 26 years. So one hopes I've learned something along the way. And I wanted to share with you 5 key lessons that I think have been important for me in my journey as a consultant. And there are 5 key points. It's really around reinvention. What's your story? What are your strengths? Who's on your board of advisors? And faith. And what I'd like to do is speak to you for about 25 minutes and then give you 7 or 8 minutes to perhaps discuss in groups your thoughts and reflections on what I've covered, and then take some questions, and then we'll finish off and have you out of here by 1:30. Does that make sense? Does that work with that? Okay, great. So as a starter, what I'd like you to do is firstly reflect on the question on how has the world of diversity and inclusion changed for you in the time that you've been in as a practitioner. For those of you who are non-practitioners, what have you noticed in terms of diversity and inclusion? How has it changed? What have you noticed? Can you please take 3 minutes or so to just discuss that with people around you? Thank you. Thank you. So perhaps I can get some feedback from the group. What have you discussed? What have you noticed? I'm sorry, I'm being actually filmed for this, for the AIS, and they told me specifically not to move away from the stand under the lights. I said, what about the lighting? Will you be able to see me on film? So, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, let me hear from you. How has it changed? What have you noticed? How has the world changed?
Society more diverse.
So society is more diverse. Nan, thank you from Vic Roads has come. She brought a whole team here. Good to see you, Nan. So society has become more diverse. So therefore, we are just interacting with people who are different on a regular basis.
At least we're having a conversation. It's on the agenda that's also increasingly polarised. So we've got the conversation going, but it's also a polarised conversation.
Very good. We have the conversation going. Yes. I was thinking about that, if in the early 90s to have a group of people come together to speak about cultural diversity would have been impossible to get more than half a dozen people. Impossible. And even then they'd go like, what's for lunch? What else? What from this side of the room?
I think that there's ignorance. I mean, having lived in different countries that embrace different cultures more readily and have been for years, I think that we've still got a long way to go.
Yeah.
About understanding that.
Well, I'm Malaysian, and I lived in the UK, and then now I live here. In every single country, the level of cultural diversity is so different. Like maybe because, like in Malaysia, I go and celebrate different festivals, like Chinese New Year, Hari Raya. I'm in someone else's house. I've not done that since I've left Malaysia. In the UK, well, you have a lot of like Indian, people from the Caribbean and all those kind of backgrounds where, they've been around in London at least for maybe 50, 60 years. So you've got another layer, another level of like diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
Coming to Australia, maybe the diversity level, especially people of color, it's fairly new. So for me, I was like, whoa, what have I stepped into?
Right.
It's changing. It's changing.
It's changing.
Which is good.
Yeah. Okay. So we're on a journey, right? We're on a journey. Great. Anyone else? Yeah.
I would say there's a bit of a disconnect between the disadvantaged groups and the like HR teams and diversity inclusion teams. There's a lack of education, but there's also fear to what to say or not to say, and there needs to be a better bridge built between the two.
Great. Yeah. And actually, we are the bridge builders, aren't we? So in terms of the 5 themes I want to talk about, I have an overarching conceptual framework. And the overarching conceptual framework is that who you are is more important than what you do. Who you are is more important than what you do. In terms of the most effective tool that you have for change, the most effective tool is in fact you. And if there's going to be anyone that's going to need more work, it's you. Because we are the agents of change, and we have to model that. So the 5 key things I want to talk about, firstly around reinvention, let me just tell you, a story around this. In 1997, I was running a public workshop in Perth. In my early days in consulting, I used to run public workshops. I was running a public workshop in Perth on cultural diversity, and we used to talk about things on what is cultural diversity. Why is it important? Why do we need to pay attention to that? This was the early days. And there were a number of people in the group who were there who had been sent by their managers. So there was a degree of resistance. Have you had people like this before? Right? So, every time you're saying something, they kind of throw some snide comments in, and they always have a perspective. Of course, you're kind of going along. And anyway, at one stage, one of the participants said, listen, if they just don't like it, why don't they just go back? Okay? And somehow it just pressed a button for me. It pressed, and I just flared up and lost my temper. Okay? Basic rule 101 of facilitation, right? Don't take it out on the group. I forgot all about it because it became personal. Right? It became personal. They were attacking me personally, and I felt attacked. So I did what most people would do, right? It's either fight, flight, or freeze. I fought. Okay? And then I realized actually that's a poor and very ineffective way of creating change. It's ineffective. On reflection, I thought, no, that's not good. So one of the things I then started to do was I thought to myself, actually I have to reinvent how I deal with this. I have to get better at what I do. I have to get better at engaging with people who have a different point of view. I have to get better at engaging with the other. I may not agree with the other, but I need to be able to engage with them. Because if they don't engage, how can I even have the conversation? So part of my reinvention involved me then in getting involved with a huge number of professional and personal development programs, which I've done ever since in my career. Because I think as a change agent, it's really important for us to be constantly pushing our own education. How do we become more agile? How do we understand what it's like to actually sit in a program and not actually understand concepts? How do we understand what it's like to be a participant and actually discuss things that actually doesn't make sense or is not comfortable? So reinvention actually forces you to think about how do I in fact shift my thinking on a regular basis. So my reflection point for you is, as practitioners, how are you reinventing yourself? My second point is to do with story. I came out here originally from Malaysia as a foreign student. And I didn't complete university because I just sort of didn't like it. I was in a business course and I left and I started working. Those were the days when you could do that, easily without getting caught. So I did that. I'm legal now. And when I started working in the area of diversity, I grew up in a small town in Malaysia, 5,000 people. My parents were teachers. And in a country like Malaysia, teachers are very well respected. In a small town especially, everybody knows your parents. And I remember at the age of 7, my parents bringing home an American man. He was with the Peace Corps. And it was my first time of meeting an Anglo-white man. 7 years old, I remember that. And it was fantastic to actually see him engage with us. And I saw inclusion. My parents practicing inclusion. I didn't know what it was at that time, but it kind of struck me in terms of that. And then when I went back to school in the 90s, I went back to university, we had a recession here in 1990. Most of you will probably be too young to remember this, but we had a recession here. This was the recession we needed to have. And I lost my job. I was unemployed. I couldn't get a job for the life of me. So I did a number of psychological profiles, and it showed that teaching and training were just important and part of my core values. My parents were teachers, my grandfather was a teacher. So I thought, okay, I'll go back to school. And when I was studying for my master's topic, I was thinking, what am I going to do? And a friend of mine, Ed Trost, who was visiting here from the United States, said, Tom, you should look at this topic called cultural diversity. It's big in the US, it'll probably become big here. And when I read about it, and especially when I read about the cross-culture piece, it just resonated for me. I thought this makes perfect sense. Growing up in Malaysia, we learn how to be culturally sensitive, we learn how to navigate. I thought, wow, this makes so much sense. And there's research on this, there's stuff here. And that kind of took me on the path. And the reason why it's important for us as practitioners is we need to have a story on why you do the work that you do. The work is tough, folks. It's not easy work. We've chosen to do this work. What's your story? Why do you do it? Because that's important for you to share that and be able to share that with people on why you think this is important work. And what is it that gives you the energy? So here's my next reflection point is, what's your story? And how do you tell that story so that it resonates. My third point is to do with strengths. Most of you would have heard of Gerd Hofstadter. Have you heard of Gerd Hofstadter? So Gerd Hofstadter is the guru, the grandfather of cross-cultural work, right? I mean, his texts are the kind of fundamentals. Apart from Edward Hall, who was before him, but Gerd Hofstadter is the professor who did the 5 dimensions of culture, was the first person who actually did empirical research on cross-cultural differences. I had an opportunity to interview him here in the mid-90s when he was here. And I was doing this, I had 30 minutes with him. To speak to Professor Hofstadter, right? Wow, it was amazing. I'm sitting there, I'm doing this interview, I'm asking him a couple of questions, and 10 minutes into the interview, and it is not going well. Okay? And I thought, so I paused, I said, Professor, I'm really sorry, I just don't feel this is going well. Perhaps you can teach me how to do the interview better. All right? Student. He said, Tom, I'm a researcher. I love data. I love analysis. I love being in the laboratory. I love creating theories. He said, but you're a consultant. People like you take my theories and bring them to life. People like you take my theory and explain how it works in the real life outside the laboratory. That is what you are good at, Tom. I am good at doing the data. You are good at that. And that was a seminal moment for me. And I thought, yes, playing to your strengths. So my third reflection point for you is, what are your strengths? And how do you play to it? Do you like teaching? Do you like doing research? Do you like writing policies? Do you like speaking? How do you play to your strengths? Because if you play to your strengths, you will always have a market. And nobody can be as good as you when you're playing to your strengths. My fourth reflection point for you is trusted advisors. I was very fortunate in 2000 to get picked up by Shell International, and there was a group of 12 of us, and we worked with their top 1,000 leaders around the world. It was amazing work, really exciting, and part of that allowed me to develop a series of cross-cultural leadership programs that we rolled out across Asia Pacific. And they said to me at that time, my client said to me, why don't you run this? Get some people together and why don't you run it? I thought, okay, great. So here's my opportunity to grow a firm. So I started looking at hiring associates, getting people in all the different countries, teaching them the materials, etc. 6 months into the program, I was in Florida with my coach. I was doing a coaching program. I was as a participant, and my coach at that time, Alan Wise, the consultant's consultant. I was having a one-on-one session with him, and he said, Tom, are you having fun? I said, no. Well, are you making money? I said, no. Why are you doing it? I said, well, opportunity, large firm, I want to also have a sense that I too can. He said, you're the brand. People buy you. They trust you. Why are you doing all these things that you don't like doing? And it was again, that ability for him to just cut through my morass. And I heard him. I came back the following week, and I had my first meeting with a client, Cadbury Schweppes at that time. I went in, they were doing some work with India, they were looking for some help. There were three companies. And I said to the client, I said, I'm the principal, I'm it. Who you're seeing is who you're dealing with. And we won that work, and we did work with them around the world. And a little later, the client said to me, after we'd obviously built a relationship, she said to me, you know, Tom, the reason why you won that business? You won that business because you were very authentic and you said there was only you. And we wanted to deal with the principal. So sometimes it takes the courage to move into action. My reflection point for you on the fourth point is, who are your trusted advisors? Who are the people who can give you feedback with candor? All of us as human beings are biased. Okay, we're all biased, all of us. Bias keeps us alive. But here's something about bias. We are not able to see our own biases. Okay, we cannot see our own biases. We can see biases in other people. And guess what? Other people can see biases in us. So you need people who can actually hold up a mirror to you. You need people who you can sound ideas out of and get feedback. You know, when I was putting this presentation together, one of the things I was thinking about was, gosh, you know, should I use slides? All right? I want to be inclusive to all the visual learners. I don't know, what slide should I use? But you know, well, what am I going to do? You know, I'm going through. So I talked to one of my trusted advisors, and he said, Tom, you know, listen, when you are presenting, when you're going to talk to them, talk to the people, you are going to be raw, you're going to be naked, you're putting yourself in front of people. You are not going to hide behind any slides. And that is going to take more courage. And it's going to put you on the edge. And Tom, over the years I've known you, you always do your best work when you're on the edge. My fifth point is to do with faith. How do we get the energy, or how do you get the energy to keep doing the work? What is it that sustains your passion? I have met a lot of jaded D&I practitioners. In fact, sometimes they are so jaded, they're worse than dealing with the clients. It's just important for us to be able to think about, you know, how do I sustain myself? Now, it may be through prayer, it may be through meditation, it may be through exercise, it may be through music, it may be through walking down the beach. Whatever it is, you need to find a practice that sustains you. Because if you don't sustain your own energy, if you don't sustain your own faith, you get tired. And when you are tired, you are not being useful to yourself and to your clients. So my 5 key points for you. Questions around how do you reinvent yourself? What's your story? And how do you practice that narrative? What are your strengths? How do you play to that? Who are your trusted advisors? And how do you allow them to give you candid feedback? And what's your faith? And how does that sustain you? Please take about 4 minutes. Have a discussion on those points and see if you can come up with some questions that you'd like to ask. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jen.